At this time, we'll call to order the Board of County Commissioners meeting for the purpose of our Committee of the Whole in regards to the Nelson plant issues. And will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Fast.
Aye.
Commissioner Myers is absent. Commissioner O'Hara.
Here.
Commissioner Hanslick.
Hanslick here.
Commissioner Ashcraft. Here. Commissioner Allenbrand.
Allenbrand, aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Eilert is here. So we do have a quorum. It's my understanding, Ms. McCarrick, that we do not need to make a decision today. This is information only. So
That's
I'll
correct.
turn the meeting over to you.
All right, very good. Thank you very much, Chairman and Commissioners. Appreciate your time this afternoon. We're excited to give you an update on the Nelson project. There has been a great deal of work done by the team since we last talked to you about the project. Just to let you know who I have here with me today, I'm going to turn the presentation actually over to them here in just a moment. But I've got Aaron Witt, Chief Engineer. I have Patrick Denning, who is our Assistant Chief Engineer for Existing Infrastructure. I also have here on my left, your right, BJ Peterson. He is with McCarthy, so that's the construction manager team. And then on the far end there, we've got Derek Cambridge, and he's from Black & Veatch. They're the engineering design team. So today what we want to do is give you an update on the Nelson project, including current cost estimate, the status of the project, and we have some new good news to share about financing opportunities as well. The current, if you've peeked ahead in the slides, current cost estimate at the 30% design is around $600 million, which is about 4.5% above our $574 million budget that was established back in February so that we could close on that WIFIA loan. This is 4.5% above in a market that has increased 15% over the same time period, and BJ will get into that a little bit more here in a few minutes. So the team's going to talk you through the work that's been done to date and the work that they're continuing to do as the project design proceeds. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to Aaron.
Mr. Witt?
Chairman, Commissioners, good to see you. Just want to touch on our agenda for the day. I want to touch on the drivers and the background for the project.
You move the microphone a little closer or speak directly into it.
It might not be on.
Yeah,
Is it on?
can you hear me better now?
Is the green light on? Yeah.
Yes. So we want to give you a quick reminder on the drivers and the background for this important project, along with our overall project update, talk through our 30% cost model and where we're at with that, along with our path forward and next steps for the project. Nelson's our oldest treatment facility and is at the end of its useful life. The existing technology will not meet the future water quality requirements and needs to be replaced. So the regulatory driver for this project, including the wet weather system capacity, was a key part of us developing our integrated plan. We entered into a consent order with the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, or KDHE, and that included our integrated plan as part of that consent order. So a quick reminder of how Nelson fits into our integrated plan. Nelson's our next large treatment facility that follows the Tomahawk facility. And it was also one of the highest rated projects from a benefit score perspective in our integrated plan. Again, we need to move forward with Nelson because it's a key initial project in the plan and allows for future system capacity enhancements to be made. Nelson is, I just want to add, Nelson's one of the many important projects or programs that we're implementing as part of this long-term plan that we can make sure that we take care of the assets that we have, improve system capacity, and then also allow for growth and development within our community. Next slide, please. So these are the rate projections from our budget discussion this summer. As a reminder, our rate projections include both our capital and our operating costs. We're projecting 5% average rate increases over the next 10 years. And then as you can see, you're probably familiar with the graph in the upper right-hand corner from the budget discussions. We're the second lowest rates in the metropolitan area, and proud of that. So this is being accomplished by a few things. From the operating budget perspective, the Tomahawk facility and project removed a large portion of the operating cost from that Kansas City, Missouri cost impact. And then the planned state line pump station and force main project will further reduce those operating costs. From a capital budget perspective, the integrated plan has allowed us to develop a long-term capital spend that will take care of the assets that we have in an affordable way, and also allows us to include these larger plant improvement projects such as Tomahawk, Nelson now, and in the future we have Mill Creek and Blue River. Switch back to focus on Nelson, and wanted to remind you of why we selected the construction manager at risk, or CMAR, delivery method. McCarthy Building Company was selected as our CMAR. The project presents challenges from the perspective of building a new facility while we continue to treat flows. So phasing is an important piece of that we needed to look at. Collaboration is needed from all team members, so the CMAR, the Black & Veatch engineering team, as well as JCW staff. Currently, McCarthy has about 20 people that are housed at the Nelson facility so that we can facilitate that conversation and project understanding. Talk through value engineering and constructability. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. And then also the delivery of a guaranteed maximum price or package. With Tomahawk, as you recall, we had one guaranteed maximum price package that we did as that. And obviously you know that we've been here multiple times for packages so far on the Nelson project. So today we want to talk through the strategy behind having those multiple packages. There's been a lot of progress over the last year and a half, and we wanted to point out some of those major milestones. For background, we completed the study for Nelson in 2018 and submitted our initial letter of interest to EPA for the WIFIA loan in October of 2020. And that brings us to this slide, which Black & Veatch design team was selected in March of 21. McCarthy was brought on as CMAR in October of 21. The month following that, in November, is when we submitted our application to EPA for the WIFIA loan. The board approved project funding in February of 22, and that was important, so that allowed us to close on the WIFIA loan in April of this year. The boards approved a guaranteed maximum price 1, and that was for the force main material in June, or this summer. And then in August, Black & Veatch delivered the 30% design. McCarthy took that and turned that around as the 30% cost model in October. And then most recently with guaranteed maximum price 2, that was approved in October, and that was for the installation of the force main along with the traffic signals. You may recall this slide from our discussion in January of this year, but as a quick reminder of how we got to our current budget number of $574 million. In October of 2020, we submitted the WIFIA letter of interest. And the estimate at that time was for $472 million, and that was based on our 2018 study. In the year following, and prior to submitting the loan application in November of 2021, escalation was impacting projects across the country at that time. Fortunately, we had just brought on the CMAR in October, and they were able to give us some early input there. And at that time, we knew that we needed to handle something for the escalation we were seeing. So we had discussions with EPA, and they encouraged us to include that in our application so that they could increase the funding amount that they were allotting to us. And the majority of the increase at that time was in escalation and contingency. We also shifted some capital projects into the Nelson budget. We added a small amount of additional capital projects. The example of that is what we did in GMP 1 and 2. We included the force main installation so that we could coordinate that with the City of Mission, and they could repair Fox Ridge at that time. And then we also included some funding for acquiring land for the collection maintenance facility. So today, as we talk through this, we want to talk to how we are shifting some of the pie that you see there, the dollars allocated in that pie chart. Next slide. So in April of this year, we secured our WIFIA loan for just over $281 million and locked in the interest rate of 3.01%. This provides us early financing cost certainty and saved us an estimated $80 million in financing costs compared to traditional bond issuance. So next slide, please. So we haven't shared this with you yet, but some more great news. Earlier this summer, we started pursuing additional financing source for the other half of the Nelson financing. The original plan was to issue bonds for that, but after speaking with KDHE, we submitted Nelson, and it was included in KDHE's intended use plan. This allows us to pursue the application of a state revolving fund loan that's administered by KDHE. The interest rate for the loan is set at 60% of what the market rate is. It uses an index for the prior 3 months to when you close that loan. So for example, the interest rate for the typical bonds has been around that 4% mark over the last 3 months. So if we close this month, that would mean that we could close at estimated around 2.4% on that. So considerable savings. The plan is to divide the funding, or that $276 million, into multiple annual loan amounts, and that was the preference at KDHE versus having one large loan amount of $276 million. We plan to request board action coming in December 15th that would allow us to apply for this loan piece, and we're also asking that the board delegate that authority to Susan to be able to submit that application. We plan on closing the first loan amount in the first quarter of next year, or at the end of first quarter, maybe early second quarter for that first loan amount. And so we looked at it and tried to estimate what would happen. Again, this is going to be multiple annual, but we looked at it if it was an average of 4.5% from a typical bond percentage, what this loan would enable us to do is save about $64 million in financing costs by utilizing the SRF loan funding. So between WIFIA and the Nelson financing, there's potential that we're saving over $140 million in financing costs. So with that, I'll turn it over to Patrick and let him talk a little bit more about the actual project status.
Will we ask questions, Mr. Chairman?
Well, okay, let's stop here. Anything that's been presented so far? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Aaron, clarify the loan that we get. It's going to be in a series of payments up front, or do we submit bills to them and they reimburse?
So this is for the the state revolving fund loan. Yes. So what we're going to do is lay out our cash flow of what the project looks like with the state, and then we would go probably on an annual basis is what they're looking at right now, and they would give us a loan for that amount. And so yes, we would submit after we have it, our expenses. We would submit for reimbursement.
Okay. I was hoping we got it up front and we could invest. So, all right. Thank you.
Always thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So did I hear right? It was only 4.5% over the cost increase?
Yeah, that's correct. We're going to talk about that a little more here. in a few
Okay, that's
minutes, but-
unbelievable.
Yeah.
And over 140 million in savings because of the way this loan was set up?
Right, because of these two financing options that we've been able to pursue. The WIFIA, 80 million, the SRF Aaron was mentioning, that's based on interest rates today, and then the SRF is always below that, 60% below, or excuse me, 60% of the market. So if we were estimating it today and being able to enter into the full loan agreement today, that's the estimated 60 million he was talking about. Now, you know, since we're closing the loan in multiple years, those interest rates will adjust, but we'll always be able to get a better interest rate through SRF, so we'll always be saving.
Well, I can't say enough in congratulating you on that. And if I was out in the private sector, I'd hire you all. I'd say, come work for me. Great
Thank you.
job.
This is a great team.
I'm glad you're not in the private sector to hire them.
Great job.
Other questions? Ms. Ira?
What was the original, are these cost savings based on the original interest costs that you had anticipated? Or is this anticipated on what market rates would be and what you're getting? So how's that $140 million, how did that savings
Yes, on the WIFIA perspective, Baker Tilly did an analysis back when we closed that loan to look at what the market was at that point versus what we got through the WIFIA loan. So that was their estimated savings of $80 million. With the SRF portion, we were just trying to get a feel for what that could be over the life of that loan, because it's going to be multiple annual
Correct.
loans.
And this savings, are these bonds 20-year bonds? Are they 20-year bonds?
The SRF loan is 20-year. There's
Okay.
flexibility built into the WIFIA.
And the 4.5 is from the escalated cost of $574 million, because originally it was $472 million. And so the $472 million, and it's up to $600 million, that's a 27% increase since early 2021. And I'm sure that we're going to be looking at some additional increases. And those cost increases, how are we going to be financing those? And I have one other question: is the state subsidizing the interest rate? Is that how we get 60% of the market rate?
I'm unsure of the details of how they came to the 60%.
Because they would be out in the open market also. And they're going to have to, they're coming up with this money somehow or another, and I'm assuming it's some sort of bonding. And they're looking at the same market as we do, and I'm just curious. It seems to me that probably the state is subsidizing this. Can you just, that's just
We'll find out
curiosity.
We can get some more
details on that.
clarification.
Okay.
That's kind of how the program's been always been set up. As we
Yeah, and
know from
I'd
that.
just be really curious if we had an initial interest cost on the project for the 20 years and where we're at now, just
For the SRF loan, you mean?
for total.
For the total?
Yeah, for the total.
Okay.
I'm assuming that in the beginning, we had an estimate as to what our interest costs were going to be.
Sure, so just as a reminder, Nelson is not the only project in our capital plan, and so, traditionally in our financial plan, we have carried a conservative 4%, and I realize that's not where rates are now, but that's when we would have been doing our financial plan back when we were originally planning Nelson, 4% would have been built into the model for the entire capital program, not just the Nelson project.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. Okay, thank you.
All right, continue, please.
All right, I will be talking a little bit about the actual facility here. This is our current site plan based on the 30% design view. This is a view from the southwest, so if you've been to the site before, the Knoll Avenue is kind of on the top right hand of your screen, and north is kind of to the left there, but this is a view from the southwest of the facilities. I'm not going to walk through all the facilities and what they do, but it's very similar unit processes to what we've used at the Tomahawk wastewater facility that I know many of you have visited. We have consolidated these facilities to the northeast quite a bit, so a majority of the facilities are towards the northeast end of the plant or of the site, and the goal of that was to get some distance between the wastewater facilities and the current residences that live to the south and to the west. We have placed our administration facilities along the south of the plant. Some of those are existing, and some of them are new. That will be, but that's to give some buffer between the unit processes from the wastewater plant and again the residences. And I'll point out a few more specifics on this. We've got a flyover video kind of at the end, and I'll talk to that as the video plays. So again, the goals of the project. Protecting the environment. This facility will be able to meet the current and the future permit limits, including nutrient removal, so constituents like ammonia, nitrogen, and phosphorus that the state is requiring. And as Aaron mentioned, it's sort of the first step in our wet weather flow reduction plan for the Nelson area. So remember, a key driver of the integrated plan was the elimination of the peak excess flow treatment facilities. And Nelson will be built such that it can take a lot of the initial flow when those facilities are eliminated. Here we're showing two of those facilities that will be sized to handle future wet weather flows when they're brought to the plant. So for our customers, we've had 2 open house events at the facility. We invited the public, and they came to the facility. The first one was to get input on what was important to people on the project, and we used that survey data to then develop the 30% design, and we presented the 30% design with many of the figures that we're showing today to the public on October 6, 2022. And the survey below is how well did we answer their concerns that they had presented previously. So we got some pretty good results that we, on a scale of 0 to 5, pretty high scores for being able to answer their questions. So we are definitely taking into account the feedback we're getting from the community. We have a project website as well, jcwnelson.com, where we're keeping the public up to date on the project, and all the information from those open houses is there as well. We also continue to coordinate this project with the cities of Mission and Roland Park, which is right next door, and are taking into account their CIP projects and other things as well. We're currently going through the planning, preliminary development plan with the city of Mission.
Are we, questions at the end? Is that the?
Did you have a particular question?
Well, on Null there is a major concern by residents. And I mean, how many vehicles do you think will be parked there? And in that, there's that little circle that there's, legacy trees. I think there's concerns that, that people are going to be parking on the green space, hit the trees. And so I just would really, I don't know how you can enforce it, that you don't have people parking on the park, running over the trees that are in that circle space, and to be good stewards.
BJ, you might want to speak to that, but I think we're doing some fencing and some other things to define the construction project from a safety standpoint.
Yeah, keeping everyone on the asphalt roadway is the plan, and there should not be any traffic over the top of the green spaces there.
How much traffic will enter on Null? Which way will it be coming into Null?
We plan
Or
on,
they'll be coming through the plant and then Null?
yeah, we'll be filtering everyone up through the plant, and then basically on the back side of Null, they'll be able to access that. So we'll be down by the park on the north end instead of up by the residents on the south end of Null.
So then with all the parking there, will the park not be usable? Because there'll be so many people parking there?
We just plan on using the asphalt space. We do plan on having walkways and pathways for that farthest south parking lot for people to still be able to park there, and they'll still be able to walk on the walkways and get to the park. And there's also access, on the other side through the back way.
I mean, it's just key that there's some spaces because people mountain bike there, families that there's, it's not a walkable place park to walk to, so you have to drive because that Null is so small, narrow, and so that not all the spaces are used.
We spent some time too talking to Roland Park because they plan on doing upgrades to that area as well. So we'll have to definitely work with them on making that a better spot for the community.
Okay, thank you. Continue, please.
Sure. So public feedback has influenced some design decisions, and this was just to kind of show that the layout did have the public in mind. So we've tried to, again, consolidate facilities, number one, with new technology, keep it to a smaller footprint away from the permanent residences, and buffered by the administration facilities, which obviously cannot generate odor. So the blue here is the administration facilities that you're seeing. And those are obviously strategically placed between the wastewater and the treatment processes and the residents. And then the items in green are buildings that have the potential to generate odor, and so they are being provided with odor control systems. Another item that we received a lot of feedback on was screening of the facility today. You can see right into the facility off of Null. And so the general approach here is, number one, the site's going to be lowered a bit overall. The grading and the new processes are going to be a bit lower. Second, we are planning on constructing berms along Null and along 49th Street. On top of those berms, we plan on planting evergreen trees, but also other types of trees to screen the facility, as well as having a wrought iron fence. And you'll see this better in a moment when we do the flyover. I can show better what that looks like, but that will provide some screening to the facility that doesn't exist there right now.
You're going to have wrought iron? A wrought iron fence?
It'll be like an iron fence, like what's in front of Tomahawk, for example. Yeah.
It'll be aluminum.
I'm sorry?
It'll probably be aluminum, right?
Sure, yeah, that's just
Okay.
the,
Okay, because iron is so wrought iron is expensive.
I just meant the motif
Okay.
of the iron.
Okay, sorry.
That's been a huge issue for Mission and Roland Park to have, like your other waste facilities have the green barriers. So that green space will be in front of the fence, correct?
So, yeah, the fence will be in front of the trees, I believe, is the way is the impact we get, or the,
But they'll blend in together, so it's not like, now it looks like a prison place.
right. Yeah, so it won't be a chain link with the barbed wire and so forth. And, and that's what's there now.
Aluminum.
And we did also, so we did this, we met with Roland Park and Mission to get input on the berm and the trees and the fence. We also met with the sheriff's office and the physical security specialists that they have to understand their preferences on that as well.
Okay, all right, continue, please.
I'm going to turn over to BJ to talk a little bit about the construction environment.
You can see here at the very bottom left, that is when we submitted the original budget at 472. So that was early July of 21. And you can see that over that period of time to today, we've seen 27% increase in the market due to escalation. Since the time that we submitted our 15% cost model, the escalation has risen by 15%. And you can see some of the blips there that typically we could count on 3 to 4% historically. Some of those blips are 6% increases month over month. Some of them due to worldwide, issues like war and other things. We originally assumed a 3% escalator for each facility to the midpoint of construction at our 15% cost model.
Thanks, BJ. So, as Aaron mentioned, we brought McCarthy on pretty early, and they were able to get us a 15% cost model fairly quickly to see where we were at. And so the team could dig in right away to figure out how are we going to offset some of these overages. So the first thing the team did is started working on value engineering items. I'll talk more about what that means in a moment, but just the numbers. The team was able to reduce the project cost by $40 million through value engineering efforts working together. We also identified items that we can defer to the future in our integrated plan. And the team identified $50 million of projects that can be deferred to a later date. I'll talk more about what those mean now. So if we value engineered something, there's no future expenditure, right? So like the team found a better way to achieve the same thing. So if maybe we rearrange the site to save piping costs and those pipes got shorter, for example. So that's a value engineering thing. There's no future expenditure. A deferral is a future project. So we identified $50 million that we could defer. So for instance, pump station or offsite force main work, for example, we found a way to modify the design and be able to defer that. We're planning on deferring our fats, oils, and grease receiving. And we also are keeping our collections O&M staff located at the Nelson facility. One thing that, well, I'll get to that in a minute.
I have a quick question on that one.
Sure.
So the $50 million that has been saved on value engineering and deferral, if we did not find the value or we did not do the deferrals, then the cost would be $650 million? Is that what we're saying?
690 million, yeah, because there's
$690 million.
Yeah, because there's $40 million that we were able to VE out. So that money's been saved. But we do have deferrals of $50 million.
Okay, so $40 million is value engineering.
That's correct.
And then deferral is $50 million.
That's right.
So this $50 million we're going to have to spend at some point.
That's correct.
And so our actual cost of the original design has gone from 472 to 650?
So I would call it the project, because some of the things that have been deferred are projects that we had brought into that 574 for the WIFIA loan to take advantage of the financing, the interest rates with the financing. The one thing I want to take you back to is the integrated plan. I mean, the framework of the integrated plan is the adaptive management piece. And so while we will have to do those projects at some point in the future, the integrated plan allows us to optimize our plan so that it is a cost that we'll have to incur in the future, but we can, that's what Aaron's team's doing, and he can maybe explain a little bit better, but we're working that into the plan in the future so that we can adapt it and work so that we're not impacting the
Okay,
projected
so
rates that
if we'd gone, I'm just trying to, in my mind, what has really been the cost increase? Because if we had not changed the engineering, there would have been an additional $40 million. So from the original design, then it would have been $690 million. But because of the, so I mean,
That's the advantage to bringing a construction manager on so early in the design.
Yes,
Because they
I
can work
understand.
together. That's the important thing, is we
Yeah.
want to provide the most cost-effective approach to the project and not sacrifice the goals of the project.
right, so in my mind, I'm just going, okay, we had a $472 million project that has, from the original design, has ballooned up to 690. However, I think you have like 30 million that you brought additional costs into the project because of the WIFIA. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't remember that number.
Okay, so
30 or 40 million.
So basically, it's 472 million up to 660 million, but then because we have figured out the value engineering and deferral of future projects, we're down to 600 million.
Well, the economic factors today are much different than they were back in 2021. And we've experienced that recently with the MedAct facility. I believe it was in Shawnee. So that's the way the world is.
I'm not arguing that how the costs have increased. I'm just trying to get this in my mind, how much we've really increased, and then what we have done. I mean, 50 million, deferring 50 million, that is going to be an additional cost. And the fact that we have found 40 million in re-engineering it, I mean, that's fantastic news. But I'm just trying to get it in my mind to see how much we really have been, if we had stuck with the original design.
Well, the value engineering approach is an excellent approach, and so congratulations on that. So to save us dollars.
Slide 19 gets to that.
Do we have a
Slide 19.
timeline as to when we're going to have to be expending this $50 million?
That's what we'll be working on as we update the capital plan. So we'll be speaking to that, I would expect, in next spring's budget. We'll have a better idea of how those things lay out. Is that the time frame? Yeah. So, and again, remember, those were included in the CIP already. We just included them in the project. So they're still in the CIP. So we can speak to when those will.
All right, let's continue.
Okay.
And there it is.
Okay, so on October 15th, McCarthy delivered the 30% cost model, and their estimate was $610 million in change. And then since that time, we have not stopped doing VE and deferral items, and we found some large VE items based on looking at their numbers and seeing where the costs were. And our current estimate is right around the $600 million. So we've been able to get an additional $10 million out of the project. So the path forward. So how are we going to try to move forward here? And BJ and Derek will talk more about this in a minute. But first of all, we have an experienced team. This team's worked together a lot. We've accomplished some things already. This team's delivered Tomahawk through a pandemic and other things. We have a great working relationship. I think that helps us identify VE and challenge each other. We also are looking at some ways that we could potentially accelerate the schedule. Time is money on a big construction project like this. And we're working with the state to see if there's some ways that we can sequence things to go a little bit faster to help potentially offset some costs. Adaptive management, so this is what we talked about previously. The integrated plan allows us to move projects around, deferral projects to fit them into the CIP where they make sense. Competitive bidding, BJ is about to talk about this, but we're engaging the subcontractor community to try to drum up interest for the project and get as much competition as we can. And alternative packages. There may be a spot or two where we identify two alternatives that accomplish basically the same thing, but they're different, and we might put them both out on the street and see how the bids come in, and then we can select the lower of the two if we're not certain in the planning process, which would be better economically for us.
Competitive bidding, what a concept.
Yeah, yeah.
Frequently done.
I'm going to now let BJ talk a little bit about our contractor outreach efforts.
So this is a photo from a recent event that we had over at the Marriott. 96 attendees, and we had an opportunity to really start to communicate to the market about what the plan is for some of the larger packages coming out in the spring. This project, obviously, we've got 20 or so folks that have been working on this for over a year. It's very complicated, and as you can imagine, is taking a lot of time and effort to try and communicate the right sequence and plan for the bidders to get comfortable with what that's going to look like. Over 6 years, communicating things like mobilizations and how long they're going to be able to access certain areas. There are 7 different phases to this thing, and it is a beast, to say the least, and we've got a lot of respect for it. So it'll be important for us to help the bidding market get comfortable with the project and understand, despite its length, what type of things they can do to be successful on it. I spoke to the different phases. You can see here that this highlights the different areas that we can get into. What's unique about this project, which you all know, is we've got to keep 2 of the plants running during the entire construction phase. So it's like open heart surgery, and every single line needs to be accounted for and make sure that we keep it online so that the plant maintains permit and continues to treat the flows. The the mobilizations, the sequencing, again, just important for us to make sure that we're communicating to the bidding community that we have a plan and that we can execute on it.
So I heard technically challenging earlier, and I heard beast. This is a very complex project. So next steps here, just hitting on it a bit. So BJ mentioned the 7 phases. So what we're doing with the GMPs, you've seen 2 so far. You'll see GMP 3 next week. But really what we're trying to do with GMPs is tackle the components that we can tackle now, clearing the way for bigger construction components of the project. So it's staging, getting pieces done that we can get done. And the ultimate goal with the GMP approach is to try and shorten the duration of construction, because that time is money, but also buy as much of the job as we can, knowing the escalation in the market is crazy and unpredictable. So hopefully that calms down, but we're not seeing that, as you saw from BJ's graph. So GMP3, I've got a graphic and 2 slides that shows you what that's about, but it's really site prep. It's the first package that's on the site. So GMP1 was procurement of pipe material. GMP2 was the installation of the force main on Fox Ridge. GMP3, we're now starting on the site. We're going to basically clear out the entrance, create contractor parking, staging some of that space, and creating space that we can utilize that's currently not there. GMP4 is focused primarily on early equipment procurement. So we've got a number of sole source large pieces of equipment. We've got electrical gear. So if you're tracking the market, electrical gear, 72 weeks, 84 weeks, beyond a year from approved submittals to actually get that on site. So as BJ and the team go through the schedule, we're trying to figure out where's the critical path, and when do we need a piece of equipment, and making sure that we're not delayed because time is money, and trying to identify those critical components in the process. So that's the strategy when you see all these GMPs. In addition to GMP 4, back up to 3. So in 3, we also have some chemical feed facilities, and we're constructing those early. And the reason we're doing that is those facilities allow us to get more capacity out of the existing plant, and that allows us to demolish some of the existing plant and still meet permit and create more space for the contractors to work in. So that's a lot of the thinking and strategy behind how we're implementing the project. GMP 5, as it's envisioned now, we've got summer of '23, and that is currently envisioned as a GMP for the remainder of the project based on a 60% design set of documents. So we're continually strategizing how can we speed things up, how can we beat escalation, and still provide a sound project for the county. BJ mentioned subcontractor outreach, so we're keen on, monitoring the development of those packages, how we're developing those packages, how those packages work with the market, and being in a position of how can we attract more bidders to the project in terms of what those packages look like. So we've talked a lot about cost today, right? We won't know the final cost of this project until we bid it out to the market. So McCarthy is doing a great job of communicating what the market is telling them, what their current projects are telling them now. But until we go out and say, market, how much does this cost to build, we won't know that final answer. So getting out to the market with GMP 5 is important as well. So I mentioned sole source. So there's 3 things we wanted to point out here. So competition. So competition is work packages within GMPs that goes out to the market for bidding. So we're working with McCarthy. McCarthy is working diligently on finding multiple bidders to bid those packages. In the arrangement, McCarthy is allowed to self-perform on those packages. So we continue to encourage McCarthy to work with the market and determine who is going to compete against them. So that's competition. Sole source, so I mentioned a number of pieces of equipment. So we know we want competition, right? But in some cases, a sole source makes sense. So one example of that is the UV equipment. We went through a detailed evaluation of capital cost, operating cost, the facility that houses it, tallied all those up. We looked at safety, in terms of operations. We looked at operational costs in terms of energy. And as a team, we decided this is the right choice. So some cases, in the case of the UV equipment, that's what we've done. For the filtration equipment, it's basically there's a single supplier. So we're following the path that we made on the Tomahawk project, and we're using the same technology there. So that's sole source for the most part. There's a couple others, but the UV and equipment and filtration are coming up on GMP4. And then self-perform. So we've talked about complexity and the beast of the project. Being able to communicate the maintenance of plant operations to the bidding market and the complexity and the open heart surgery that BJ mentioned is very challenging. So as a team, we've decided it's in the best interest of the team to have McCarthy do the maintenance of plant operations work throughout. So as they do that work, the engineering team's looking at that and working through those particular work items, and I think we're at 32 MOPOs now, or maybe 35. But as those enter into construction, we've got representatives out in the field, our resident project engineers. They do inspection work. They make sure everything is being built per the drawings and specs. And we'll use those resources to track those MOPOs at time and material cost. So that covers self-perform.
Okay.
And then this is, so just a graphic, but you can see GMP3 here. You can see the blue is site work. We're creating a new entrance to the plant. We've got a number of piping connections to allow us to remove facilities from service. I mentioned the chemical feed facility, the SEP there. We're creating the contractor parking area in that green space right now adjacent to Fox Ridge. So you can see the parking there. But that, and the dashes and all that, kind of show you the amount of piping and temporary piping that's going in to allow us to continue to the next step.
Yeah, I think one more note on that is, in looking at McCarthy's schedule, by doing GMP3 now, we're saving about 8 months in construction, because we're preparing that pad site for the filtration and disinfection facilities. Whereas if we just waited and did the whole project in one GMP and we had to start later, that the critical path is reduced by about 8 months by being able to do this now and early.
Thank you, Patrick. So just to reiterate something Derek said, is by saving schedule, we're saving cost, that risk of cost escalation. So this slide, we've shared this as we brought GMPs forward, but just a high level again here, designs anticipated to continue through 2023. And then construction has actually already begun on GMPs 1 and 2, and that's the force main again under Fox Ridge Drive that we've coordinated with the city, as well as those signal lights there on I-35 in Lamar to help facilitate the construction traffic once the larger project gets started. So go ahead. And so as we look at anticipated action items that will be coming to the board, again, GMP3, that site preparation package will be on the agenda next week, as will the interlocal agreement with the City of Mission for working through their processes. And Aaron mentioned then we'll request authorization to make application for that SRF loan on December 15th. And then as the loan agreement is ready to be authorized by the board, we'll bring that back to the board. Pardon me. And then GMP4 will come before the board, or we're anticipating that in the spring, and then GMP5 in the summer. A couple of notes here. So I think Derek mentioned it, but GMP5 and 6, if they find that it's needed, that timing is still being worked out. Also, similar to Tomahawk, you might recall we had several utility agreements with the various utilities, and so we would anticipate there will be at least an agreement with Evergy that we'll be bringing to the board probably sometime before GMP4 is brought to the board. So, all right, with that, turn it back over to Linda for the animation.
Right, Linda, yeah, if you've got the animation pulled up, I'll kind of talk through it as we go.
Did you bring popcorn?
No, just I'm just going to narrate. That's all you get. I'm sorry.
Maybe they'll zoom in on my house.
Who's going to have
Yeah.
We actually had a discussion about the houses in the neighborhood, and we specifically made them look different so it wasn't creepy.
Oh.
Yeah.
I hope you added another $200,000 to my assessed value.
Then you got to pay more tax.
Oh, that's true. No, less.
There's always a downfall.
Okay. So we're going to start the video coming in off of Fox Ridge Drive, which is the main entrance, and it'll be the construction entrance for the project as well. The two facilities that you see right there, the Headworks is on the left. The facilities on the right are the filters and the disinfection facility, and that's part of the pad that we're making in GMP 3 to be able to accelerate that schedule by 8 months, like we talked about earlier. The building that's got that big stair step in it there, that's a dewatering building. That's existing. We actually found a way to reuse that on site. That saved us about $7 million by the design team figuring out a way to reuse it. That's going to set the architectural motif of the site because that's a big building and it's at blonde brick. So the rest is going to be blonde brick too. You see the biological nutrient removal basins there. That's the new technology replacing those trickling filters that are now all over the site, as well as the final clarifiers, which are the cleaner water, uncovered, and the primary clarifiers are the circles that are covered. That's the more raw wastewater. Now we're going along Knoll Avenue. This is about 6 feet above, and we've got the berms and the trees, and you can see the fence there as well. Now, we realize that this is right after construction, so the trees are very small, and it doesn't look like they're providing great screening yet. They'll fill in, but that was one of the advantages of doing this rendering is we'll augment this with shrubs and grasses and things now that we can kind of see how it's going to look. We're going to turn the corner now to 49th Street where the residences are. There is a resident on the corner.
Is your house?
Yeah, that's right. And then we have kind of the same approach here. We'll have a berm with fencing and trees on top of that. And then it's going to kind of zoom out for a dramatic effect here. And that's kind of the facility. So you can see the green space between the wastewater processes there and the residents. That'll be a good enhancement to the community.
Disney ride.
There's a lot of fall across that. The elevation at Knoll and the elevation at Fox Ridge are very, very different. So there's a lot of topography across the site, and that actually increases the challenge that we have because getting access to different places and things is difficult. That concludes our presentation. Yeah.
Well, a lot of information and obviously a lot of hard work. And I want to say thank you to McCarthy and Black and Veatch. The experience that we had at Tomahawk Creek, significantly different than what is going to be required at Nelson, where we were able to shut down the flow to Tomahawk Creek and send it on to Kansas City, Missouri for the reconstruction period. In this particular case, as you've indicated, flow needs to continue to be treated. And I'm not an engineer, don't profess to even know anything about it, but I would not want to have to be in charge of this significant project because of the challenges that are going to occur. And I think it's also worth remembering for those who might be listening is that Johnson County wastewater is not supported by tax revenue, neither property tax nor sales tax. It is supported as a utility would be by the customers who use the service. And in Johnson County, Spring Hill, Gardner Edgerton, DeSoto, and some western parts of Olathe are served by their own wastewater district. So if you live in those areas, this does not impact your wastewater bill. But for all of the rest of us who live in the wastewater system, this would be paid for by the users in their annual or monthly bills that come. Again, no property tax, no sales tax. So, Ms. O'Hara?
A couple questions. How many acres, just this is curiosity, how many acres does Nelson cover approximately?
It's about 40, but I could be off by, because
That's okay.
there's
So
some area out front and so.
It's
and so forth,
approximately
too.
40 acres.
But it's about 40 acres.
Okay. And then I know that we're subsidizing the fee structure and to hold it down to 5% increase on an annual basis. How long will we be using reserves to hold down the increases to 5%? And then after that's gone, after that subsidy is no longer used, is there an anticipatory cost estimate for the users at that time?
Well, every year in our financial plan, as we did this year, we show you the 10-year rate projection. We also show you the spend down for reserves. We do have requirements we need to meet for our bond covenants. It's a coverage of 1.1, and we do our goal of 1.2. So it's 5% for the next 10 years, and we update that model every year and bring that to the board.
Okay, but at some point, reality will be hitting the ratepayers, and there will be, because we're going to have other projects, and it's just, people just need to understand that there are going, I mean, this is costly. This is a lot of money.
It's a $3 billion valued system. We have a system that serves roughly 500,000 people, and it's aging infrastructure, and we do need to continue to renew it and maintain it. I think if I recall, our rate modeler provided that, they do take a look outside of that 10-year window, and at this point, as we continue to plan, they are not seeing those rate spikes, but just as we've seen with the construction market, with an increase over the last couple of years, I don't have a crystal ball that will tell us exactly what will happen outside of that 10-year window at this point.
Okay, thank you.
What we're projecting.
I think the thing to keep in mind is this facility is 75 years old. Nothing lasts forever.
Correct.
And there's been several examples around the country of wastewater systems and water systems that have not been attended to on a regular basis. And the cost has gone way, way out of sight. So even though, it's kind of like your automobile, you can either take care of it or you'll have to get a new one right away. And so this is part of the ongoing maintenance program, and it will continue, I hope. Thank you very much for your expertise in developing and working on this project.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
Other comments, Mr. Ashcraft?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of scattered questions. I know the hope is to keep this facility open and operating, but are there contingencies in case there's a mishap, unforeseen, that would cause this facility to shut down temporarily or for some period of time? How will we be handling that? Have you worked out those contingencies? And you don't have to give me a detailed response, but I just want some assurance that you've thought about it.
You want to go ahead and talk to the...
So the facility has to continue to treat wastewater, but when we do, one of the advantages and one of the reasons we're proposing McCarthy to do the maintenance of plant operations deals is they're at the plant working with our staff every day. So we're having meetings, and we've got a whole series. They've got a very stringent series of checklists and meetings to say, have we thought about all these? And each one of those changes, they've got a plan B for. So we've got contingency plans within those plans if something were to go sideways on us. But as far as there's not another wastewater plant we can send it to. We've got to be careful when we do these things. And that's one of the reasons why we want to leverage their expertise, their knowledge of the plant, and their coordination with the team to do those critical.
I appreciate your description of sideways. I mean, those things happen, don't want to, but because of that system, this system's particulars, if it were to happen, you're thinking about it. So related to McCarthy, I was a little bit confused. On slide 24, you're talking about competition with McCarthy for some activities, some projects. Is that correct? Is that how you described it?
So McCarthy can bid on the work packages. So if there's a work package for yard piping, for example, McCarthy can put a bid in on that work package. They have to put it in earlier than the other contracting community, and they submit that to purchasing. And purchasing, our purchasing department attends all the bid openings when McCarthy is going to bid on a work package.
My question then is, how do you assure an arm's length relationship so that other potential bidders say, well, McCarthy's got it, why would we even bother? And because that might undercut your competition philosophy. That's why I was wondering. So
yeah, BJ, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, we make sure that any bid that we have, we're submitting to purchasing separately and prior to, so that there wouldn't be an instance where we could, view other folks' bids before we submitted our bid. Keeps the arm's length away. We did this similar on Tomahawk, where there was 84 work packages. We bid on 8 of them, and as a result, made sure that, that was way back when Dell was here, but made sure that we gave those bids to Dell hours before. And then he was the one that actually opened the bids and was present. So when it comes to actual bid opening, purchasing in Johnson County is present and a part of that to make sure that those bidders are comfortable with the process.
Okay. And one last question. You were talking about this facility will meet current and future standards, and we can discuss this offline. I'd be interested in how you know what the future standards will be and how you'll be addressing them, particularly in the area of microplastics and chemicals that haven't even been identified yet, how that is integrated, and maybe you just have excess capacity that you're talking about.
I'd
like to learn more.
I think the term that needs to be used is known future standards. None of us can know what's unknown. So, other questions?
There's a Secretary of Defense that used to talk about the known unknowns, so maybe you have a future in the Defense Department, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Hanslick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a comment and a question. First of all, reflecting what the chairman said, thank you for this presentation, and thank you for your hard work to ensure that the people of Johnson County who are customers of Johnson County wastewater are going to be able to continue to not think about their wastewater system, to continue to know that it's working properly. And as someone who grew up in a place where we had well water and a septic tank, I am so grateful for our wastewater system, and I'm always so impressed with how careful and thoughtful you are in these just head-spinning projects to be sure that you're doing everything possible to be as efficient and cost-effective as you can. So thank you for that. I do not want to go back to having a septic tank or an outhouse. The question I have is, I see on the map on page 25, it says Evergy relocation. I know with Tomahawk, that was a big deal that we had the power plant there on site. Is that the same kind of thing we're planning to do here at Nelson? I didn't know what that meant, the Evergy relocation.
Yeah, so these Evergy relocations are mostly, they have some lines that we need them to bury so that they don't cause issues with the construction, traffic movement and so forth, and then relocate and add some additional drops. But luckily for us, there's a substation just east of Rowe Boulevard.
Okay.
And so we'll just be getting power from there, and we don't have to do a substation on site.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate the explanation.
You know, it brings to mind a program I saw last night on public TV, KTWU, and I'm not saying that it's applicable here, but the entire program was about towns in Kansas that had been highly prosperous towns that are now ghost towns. Oil Hill in Butler County, Minden in Butler County, Neosho Falls, Runnymede in Harper County. And for various reasons, they were very successful, none related to the availability of sewers, I would say, but you have to continue to move forward or you move backward as a community. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. And so an action item will be on December 8th then, is that right? Next week?
That's correct.
Okay.
Action item, for the next action item is December 8th, correct.
Thank you very much. And our next meeting will begin at 4 p.m. in the lower level. So thank you all for your time.